Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter Select, a seasonal podcast where we bounce back and forth between a series exploring its evolution, design, and legacy. For Season 5, we are covering the Resident Evil franchise. My name is Max Roberts, and I'm joined, as always, by Logan Moore. Hi, Logan.
It's time for werewolves and vampires.
It's time for magically putting your hand back on after it's been cut off. It's time for tall vampire ladies and scary dolls, because we're talking about Resident Evil Village, or 8. It's interesting. This game doesn't have the number in it at all, which is the first for a mainline game. Well, it's visually there, but the game is just called Resident Evil Village. At least 7 was called Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. This one drops the number altogether.
Which makes me wonder what they're going to do with 9 more than anything.
Well, we have to find a word that they can draw the Roman
an
numeral
I and an X. What's a word with an I and an X in it?
Beatrix. I don't know.
Sure, Resident Evil Beatrix. It's all about the Harry Potter.
They had
lady.
a game called Code: Veronica X. I think they can call a game whatever they want.
Wait, the Harry Potter lady's not Beatrix, is it? It's
Bellatrix.
Bellatrix. Close enough.
It's close. It's whatever. Yeah, maybe we can just fuse the wizarding world of Harry Potter with Resident Evil, just like they've always wanted to do.
Helena Bonham Carter in a Resident Evil video game. That'll do the trick.
That actually would be kind of cool. That would be kind of cool. Oh my goodness gracious.
For this episode, we do have a guest with us once again.
Yes, we do.
Our good buddy Michael Ruiz will be joining us in just a few minutes. Until then, let's do the rundown real fast for all things Resident Evil Village. Once again, Resident Evil Village was developed and published by Capcom. It came out on PS5, PS4, PSVR 2, which you've noted here, which launched earlier this year, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch, which I forgot about, PC, and then Mac. They released an optimized version of this game for Mac. This thing is on
everything,
all platforms.
It's crazy.
The only thing they missed was Stadia. And in fact, there might have been a Stadia version of this.
It was on Stadia, actually. It was on Stadia. It's just you can't play that version anymore. So I did fail to mention Stadia in the notes here, but it was on Stadia.
Google.
It could be on Amazon Luna. I don't know. I didn't even look at that.
I think it might be, actually. You can look that up. It released on May 7th, 2021. The game director was Morimasa Sato. The producers were Tsuyoshi Kanda, Peter Fabiano, and Masachika Kawada. And the music for this one was done by Shusaka Uchiyama. The Metacritic score for Resident Evil Village was an 84 out of 100 on the PlayStation 5 version of the game, which, Max, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, I think is pretty low for this game, personally. I don't know how you're going to feel about this one soon enough, but I like me some of this video game here.
It's a pretty good game.
Is it on Amazon Luna?
I found Resident Evil 2. I found Resident Evil 3. I am not seeing 7 or 8. Oh,
Bezos has got to fork over the money.
This game is no longer available on Luna for Resident Evil 7. So I'm feeling like if it was on it, it's not anymore. I'm not seeing any listing, so
Ethan Winters is just too much for Luna's
Amazon
technology.
To handle. Jeff can't handle it.
He can't. Too many non-facial polygons to render.
One more thing, actually, another thing I forgot to pull up and look. The Resident Evil Village VR Metacritic score, 82. 82, but that is with 11 critic reviews. So, a little bit different.
That feels low based on how everybody's been talking about that game.
I would also agree with that. I'm actually shocked that this game has been reviewed. So I feel like if critics reviewed it today, I think it actually would be higher. This game
What's strange is it was up for a lot of Game of the Year honors, I feel like, at the end of 2021. And in fairness, 2021, I want to say, was a pretty weak year overall. It was the first year following the next-gen consoles releasing, which is always a pretty weak year on paper. But this one was up for a lot of accolades by the end of the year, which is a bit bizarre to see it only reviewed again, 84 on the PS5 version, but then the other versions of the game range between 81, 82, and 83, it seems like, for the most part. So yeah, I feel like this is, I don't know, especially looking back at it now, I feel like there's more positive word of mouth around this game than what the aggregate scores say at the time. But let's bring in our guest, Michael Ruiz, to see what he feels about this game. Michael, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, I should say.
Yes. Is this my third time here now?
I think so. You were on the Nuts and Bolts one with us.
Nuts and Bolts. Tokyo Drift.
God of Wars. You were on Tokyo Drift, yeah.
It's true.
And now Village.
Yes.
And then Ricky. Ricky was Super. And then Furious 7. And Resident Evil 2.
Okay.
So you guys are like our two most frequent guests, which is not a surprise.
I'm going to echo what Ricky said on his episode and say that you guys need to do a Yakuza one so then you can have us on there for every single episode.
Oh my goodness gracious.
How about you guys do the Yakuza season and we'll give you we'll give you placement on our feed.
Yeah, we'll be the guests on that one.
We'll lend the feed to you.
I'm not opposed to that idea, actually.
It's such a long series.
It's
a
time
commitment. That one's like one we'd have to chip at over the years and like just record as we played and then just put
the
it
hardest
all out.
The hardest part I think about that one would be is that, dude, RGG Studio does not stop. They announced 3 new Yakuza games last year, and one of them released earlier this year. It was really good.
It is.
But now we're going to get the one that's like a bridge between 6 and 8, I think, in the back half of this year. Mm-hmm. And then early next year will be 8.
Two in 1 year?
Yeah, there's another one coming out this year.
Holy cow. That is...
And
they
they're
really
good.
just keep cranking
That's
it
the
out.
thing.
Man.
That's the other thing is that they are all good. Like, this is not shovelware that they're getting out. They're all of a very high quality.
All I'm saying is if we do the Yakuza season, we have to play the zombie shooter on the PS3 and 360.
Do you also have to play Judgment as well? Does that count?
I feel like we should, yes.
Judgment,
Man, that's a lot of game.
That's a lot of video game.
2 Judgments, 7 mainline, no, 8 mainline games.
Yeah.
Then Ishin, 8 is coming up.
You could probably skip the spin-off stuff because Ishin isn't anything
Ishin's
with
good,
the Yakuza
though.
games. Ishin's
Like, that's
really
the
good.
thing is, like, Ishin's like one of the best ones I've played. So
It is very good. Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, if you count 0, there's 9 mainline games that
you
don't
have to count 0,
and that's what I'm saying.
That is a mainline game at this point. Like.
Anyway, we're talking more about Yakuza. Michael, let's talk about another Japanese video game series, Resident Evil. You played Village for us on this one, and I guess so. This is interesting. At the time we're recording this, I guess we can just kind of peel the curtain away here. Michael, you've been getting really into Resident Evil as we have been in the midst of recording this season, which has kind of been fascinating. So you are also a listener of this podcast, so thank you for that.
Yeah,
but I guess I was not aware that you were not, like, I don't know, you and I have played like Resident Evil 6 together, and I just always assumed you liked these games enough and you had played enough of them, but I guess I totally forgot that you were not too intimately familiar with this season or with this series until recently. So why did you want to play Village with us, and then I guess what did you think going back to it this time around?
So Village... I believe it's we played Village before we played Resident Evil 6, correct? Am I right in saying that?
No.
We played 6 first?
We played 6 during COVID. That was when we did
right.
that. We played 6 during COVID alongside, I want to say maybe the Halo games was the other thing we did, but we may have done that before COVID actually. I can't remember.
That might have been before it, and then maybe it went in during it. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure you like weren't working at the time when you're like, I have nothing to do. I guess I'll just play video games all day. And I was like, we could play Resident Evil 6 because sure, why not?
But yeah, Resident Evil Village is technically the first Resident Evil game I finished, unless you want to count that campaign that we finished in Resident Evil 6. So that is the first one that I have played and complete. Beforehand, I've played like pieces of the Resident Evil 1 remake, pieces of, I played Resident Evil 2. I didn't finish it, even though that game is so short. But I had played some of that remake. I had played like the older games before, but I had never completed one. But I've always had that like appreciation for it. The reason why I like Resident Evil, what it connects to me with is more the films, if anything, which is a weird thing.
Yeah, that's even more weird. I guess have never connected that you've not played the games, but you preach the gospel of the movies to us.
I love the movies. They're not good. I'm not going to say that they're good, but they are fun to watch. I watch them every year. They're great. I love that. So that's kind of my connection with the series in general. But yeah, in 2021, I played Village, and it was my favorite game of the year.
So I guess before Max or I jump in, what did you think broadly about it this time around? Did you still hold up? Do you like it a lot? I mean, and I guess how does it compare to the other ones that you've now played following wrapping Village up?
It's funny because, I played this and then I was like, you know what? I'll listen to your guys' podcast. So I just started with the first episode. I think that was 7, right? And then
that was our second episode.
That was the second episode?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. And then 1 was the first one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I listened to those 2 and I was like, you know what? I should start playing these games because I think the next one might have been 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
So then I started playing 2, or I played it and finished it. And then I listened to your podcast. And then I started playing 3, and then I listened to your podcast for it. Now I'm playing 5 now, and I haven't listened to that one yet, but I did listen to Code Veronica 1. But right now, I would say that this kind of Resident Evil Village kind of cemented it as like still like one of my favorite games of all time. I love that game. I think it's an incredible game. I think the design choices they have. I've written down here that like I think it's like kind of a weird celebration of the Resident Evil franchise as a whole because of how each section of the game plays out. I feel like it is some sort of different era of each era of Resident Evil. I just think it's a great game. I guess broadly. I mean, we could go into deeper things later, but yeah, I still love that game. I think it's great.
Max, what about yourself? I know this was one of your first exposure. Like Mike, this was one of your first exposures to the series as well.
Yeah. Like I said before, my first Resident Evil game was actually 7 and bought it for PSVR back when that launched, and then dabbled in 2, and then Village was coming out, and I was cool on it. It was just, more first-person Resident Evil. And the only reason I snagged it around launch was I had like $20 at Best Buy that was going to expire. And so I asked Abby if she wanted to watch me play, because we like spooky things, we watch scary stuff and whatnot, and it sounded like fun with the werewolves and vampires, a very different type of horror for Resident Evil. So we snagged it around launch with that Best Buy credit, and that's actually how I realized I played it on casual back then too. I've never played this game on anything higher than easy. So, and I did that because she was watching it. I didn't want a hard time. I just wanted to kind of have a fun horror experience. But she dropped off and I kept playing. And so I did beat it. But it's funny coming back, because at that time I hadn't beaten 7. So coming back to it now with, I don't know, about 7 games of Resident Evil knowledge now, I was picking up stuff that just flew completely over my head last time. Really enhanced my enjoyment this time around. But it was a cool, fun, snappy game, right? Nothing too imposing. Again, I was playing on easy, which I totally had forgotten at the time. And I just really kind of had a fun time with it. And so coming back to it, I once again played on easy. There's some other stuff there. I dabbled with VR for PSVR 2 now. And so it was overall, this game has just got a solid pace to it, and I really enjoy the experimentation, and it makes me very curious what they'll do in the future here. But this is definitely one of the more diverse Resident Evil games for more reasons than one.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites, I think.
You think?
I played this. It's hard. They're all my favorites in different ways. Like, this is one of my favorite game series ever, if not my favorite. But there's a lot about this one that I really, really love. I think the horror elements being so different with the focus on gothic style horror works out really well. Like I remember when the leaks and rumors for this game first started, and I was like, werewolves and vampires, like, what are we doing here, Capcom? This sounds like way over the top. And then it works. I don't know. It probably shouldn't work, but I guess at its core, we've talked about this over the course of the season, Resident Evil is inherently campy and goofy. So them diving headfirst into werewolves and things is like very much on brand for this series, even though it doesn't. We're pretty far gone from the days of the T-virus and there's zombies and Raccoon City. Like everything's.
But are we? Are we far from it?
Yeah,
because there's a whole lot of mold in this game. A lot of mold.
There is a whole lot of mold, and I'm sure you're alluding to some of the stuff at the end about
mega mesite or something. Like, I mean, this game goes. I think it's all still pretty much in the same vein. It's just a different type of infection.
Well, and then they try to connect all the dots between. They have Mother Miranda being like an old associate of cool. Spencer. It's really funny. We'll talk about that stuff when we get more into the story and lore and stuff that they pump in. But yeah, overall, this game really is kind of like what you were saying, Mike. It hits all the same. It's kind of a Resident Evil greatest hits, I think. It's got the through line gameplay that it's very similar to 4, as well as kind of the structure of 4. But then it's got the spooky castle that's like Resident Evil 1, and it's got the horror elements they kind of pack all into one single area with the dolls and stuff and the puzzle solving. They throw a lot of that into a single area. The fish section, I don't really know. It's just kind of there.
I thought of that as like the puzzly section because like you do a lot of more puzzle stuff. I feel like in that section more so than any other
a little
section.
bit. I mean, I guess the core element of Resident Evil that's seen there is large animals, large animal monsters, because as we've seen playing all of these games, like Max and I have even been playing, and we'll talk about this in our other episode, but like we've been playing 5, and there's a couple instances in that game where it's like big animals show up, and I'm like, oh, there we go, gotta get the large mutated animals in the picture here. So that's kind of what I guess the fish guy is. And yeah, like it's so over the top. I don't know. I think for myself, the one thing I should mention is that we all played this game in very different ways this time. Michael played it from, you did the third person perspective that you get with after the Winter's expansion came out, right?
I did, yes.
Okay. Max, you mentioned you played in VR and in third person.
I did. I wanted to play completely in VR, but I realized that was not
having a child.
With this, a 6-month-old child.
Yeah.
When she wakes up in the morning or needs something, it's just more cumbersome to pause and like take the whole thing off and then tend to her when I could just hit pause. So I did pivot, and the saves aren't compatible. You can't just play a game in VR and then restart the save in a different.
Sucks so bad because
it's so
stupid.
It's the dumbest thing because also trophies
7 was not like that.
No, 7
I don't
completely interchangeable. There's no trophy support in VR mode either, so you can't earn trophies. So it was just very, very
that really
strange.
sucks, especially for some of those like multi-run trophies that you obviously have to get, like beat the game with only using 3 health items or something like that, you know.
But I did play a few hours in VR, and then I switched to the third person. And we can talk. I'll talk about the VR stuff specifically because I think it is transformative to the game overall, but I did primarily play in third person this time, and then obviously the first time around first person.
I played on the hardest difficulty possible. Yes. I played in first person mode because I wanted to have there are only 2 first person games in this series, and I knew we were going to, I feel like it would, I knew you guys were going to play in third person predominantly because they had released that post-launch as DLC, so I wanted to still play in first person just because I feel like that's core to what this game is to some degree, and I felt like it would behoove our discussion if I played in that manner. The other thing that I did, though, was I played on the hardest difficulty, but I also had an unlimited ammo assault rifle, and by the end of the game I had unlimited ammo magnum and stuff like that, so it was just like firing away at everything. So it was not really I was not really beating my head against the wall that much. It was pretty easy, but it was fun.
I think we all buy the unlock everything pass because it was on sale while we were playing this game.
Yeah, it was like $3, I think. So
it
was just like, okay.
That might be the first unlock everything microtransaction I've ever purchased.
And I think it might be for me as well.
Same. And it was absolutely worth it.
It was amazing.
Lightsabers, unlimited ammo. It just was an absolute blast.
I completely agree.
Yep.
Totally worth every penny. They got me. They finally got me. The system works.
I think I only used I was playing on New Game Plus, so I had my stuff carry over from my last save, but so I didn't really get into many issues. I played on normal difficulty, I believe, the entire time, but I had bought that pack during the Heisenberg section, which is when I started losing ammo and stuff. I'm like, I'm going to turn on the unlimited ammo thing. And then that section became very easy and fast. So
that part of the game can be stressful for sure. If you do not. Because I remember playing through that the first time.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of our playthroughs are a little bit warped to some degree because of how we chose to play. But I mean, we can obviously still speak to it. Let's start with I want to talk about the world with this game. And I feel like that's kind of the thing we've naturally done. The title of this game is Village. I feel like the Village is the main character because I will say Ethan's definitely more front and center in this game, which I like, and we'll talk about Ethan too. How do you guys feel about just how this game is laid out, the different areas? Max, you mentioned that there's a good flow and pace to it, and I agree. This is a really, like, replaying it, this is a very brisk game. I feel like I beat this in like 4.5 or 5 hours this time through compared to like the 8 to 9 that was my first playthrough. I don't even know how I lasted 8 to 9 the first time, to be honest. I guess I was just taking everything in. But yeah, you can really fly through this, and it feels quite condensed, but in a it's not like everything's tiny necessarily. I don't know. There's a good scale to this game that I really appreciate and enjoy, and you become intimately familiar with all the different avenues of this village and all the different 3 or 4 main areas that are within it. What did you guys think about kind of the central hub and its varying locations?
So I remember the pre-release discussion around this game being, is this open environment? Is this open world? Can I go to these bosses in any order? And I remember at the time being a little disappointed that that wasn't the case, because this game actually is quite linear in its, you go to this boss and then this boss and so on and so forth. But coming back to it this time around, I'm totally content with it being straightforward. I do, and I also remember, at least myself, and I think other people as well, thinking that like Lady D was a bit more of a consistent presence throughout the game. These are more, bite size feels too small, but these were like, appetizer kind of courses for each type of horror and environment that we explore here. And so, when you go through the castle and then she's gone, it felt kind of like almost too quick, but I think they don't overstay their welcome, and it works overall quite well. I certainly didn't want to spend any more time in that dollhouse. That's absolutely for sure. So I think each, they work, and some ideas fall flat. I think the swamp is overall, I don't need the swamp. At least the way that they executed it, I feel pretty meh about the whole thing. The factory, I think, is probably, while it is scary, I do think there is a couple of moments where it's like, all right, you're just kicking me all the way back to the beginning. There's that part actually at the very end where Heisenberg, you get to the top and then Heisenberg throws you down to the bottom. And I forgot that you would run into Chris down there, but I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to make me climb this whole thing again. So I was a little bit more down on the factory, but I do think the castle and the dollhouse are the strongest of the sections or environments.
There's one more area that's I want to bring up. There's one area as well that's not really a fully fleshed area, which is like
The Village?
Oh, I was going to say like Werewolf Central, which is the kind of like one offshoot area you go to before the factory where you just fight a horde of werewolves
the caves,
for 20 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah, the other.
I forgot about that.
fortress.
Yeah, you just breeze through Werewolf City. Yeah,
But it's kind of fun. I don't know.
it's a cool world. I guess I wish there wasn't a swamp necessarily, at least the way it's done. But I like the way it's laid out overall. I do think it would be cool if the next game did have open environment and you could choose the order, a la Mega Man. Like, not that you're getting power-ups to defeat the other bosses, but choosing the order I think would be interesting balance-wise. But it works not having it here.
Sounds like Max wants to play Resident Evil 6, choosing the order of where you go and win.
I mean, we will get there, so maybe I'm wrong about this whole desire.
Michael, what about yourself?
Well, I mean, I guess I kind of said it before. I feel like, I guess this goes into with the setting itself, but I feel like this game is like a celebration of Resident Evil and really just modern horror video games. And I think a lot of that is these settings that you're in, you know, like the village itself. Having played the Resident Evil 4 remake right now, I mean, it's basically the demo that's out if you had played it too. They basically start out almost exactly the same. Like, I felt like almost exactly the same.
There's
except
a lot
one has
of Resident Evil 4
werewolves
in this game.
and one has the Las Plagas people or whatever they're called. I think that's what, I don't know. But
Muertas or
yeah.
Oh, Ganado.
Yeah.
You can just call them
That's it.
zombies. It's okay.
The zombies.
Technical terms.
But they start that whole section like start out exactly the same, but then going into the castle that's more traditional, like Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2 kind of feeling thing there. The dollhouse is the one that I feel like is very much modern horror. Like if you play something like Amnesia, or if you play something like I like that game Observer quite a bit. I feel like it feels more like that kind of modern horror video game.
I got PT vibes, big time.
Yeah, it's
PT vibes.
exactly kind of like that kind of feeling. Swamp again. That one's the weird one, the weird outlier, and I'm kind of with you, Max, on that. Where I don't really like how they executed it, but I like Moreau's character a lot because he's so goofy.
I think there was like potential with Moreau where like him as this like kind of shunned member of the family that no one likes, but like the way that they use him is not great. Like even when he explodes into a giant monster, he's just kind of like, oh, I can't control it. Help me. I think it would have been better if he would have like done that out of like anger rather than like apprehension and like, oh no, I'm turning into a giant monster. Like
Moreau's interaction with with Ethan, I think is like one of the most interesting, if anything, in any of the Resident Evils, because he's actually afraid of you when you come by. And I feel like nobody else was ever like that in any of the Resident Evil games, which I thought was like super interesting when I saw that. But yeah, the swamp area is like, I guess like the puzzly aspects, because I feel like you do more puzzles in there than anything other than the ending part.
It's kind of all puzzle until the very end.
How
do you lower the water? But it's not a puzzle because it's pretty straightforward. Just like go here and zip line across. So it is.
You just gotta dodge his little swim by attacks that he does or whatever.
Yeah, and then they do those things where they had the colored like sections where you had to like press the button. So then there's like that part, which wasn't necessarily. It's not a hard puzzle solving, but neither is Resident Evil. Like there's no really hard puzzles I feel like in Resident Evil games that I've played so far.
I feel like because the dollhouse and the swamp lake area, it's really a lake, not a swamp.
Yeah.
Actually.
Sorry guys. I wrote swamp down.
Because those two come back to back, I feel like that's why they then send you off to Werewolf City afterwards. They're like, oh, we haven't made you shoot anything in a while, and this game that's kind of the point of this game. So here, go fight a bunch of werewolves for the next half an hour.
And I mean, that section's very much more akin to like a Resident Evil 5 or 6 where you're just blowing people's brains out with stuff like just
which is kind of it's kind of satisfying though, because
it is.
They give you a lot of tools in this game and a lot of different weapons. It is like a beefier, more action focused version of 7 in that regard.
Yeah.
But you don't really get to let loose, at least for that middle chunk of the game there, too often.
Yeah.
There are a couple like smaller instances when you do. Like I think of I can't remember what the 4-legged werewolf, the Lycan beasts or whatever they're called, the
big
4-legged
one?
ones. Yeah,
Oh
the ones
no,
that
the
Max.
all fours that wander the village. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The ones that Max says he just ran away from or whatever. I believe, right? You said you
I
never
couldn't
fought
at the
those.
time that we spoke, and I hadn't killed any of them. Then I got unlimited ammo.
And then you went and killed
yes.
Yeah, then I killed them and got the trophy. Turns out I was only like a bullet away from killing the one by the house. Like, because I had done so much damage to it previously,
because that's when they give you the grenade launcher, I believe.
It is.
It's when you first
it's
see that one.
closest. So I had shot it a bunch. Apparently, I was only like a bullet or two away from it falling over. So
So yeah, they intermingle combat there, and then they don't really. The factory. That's the one thing I'll say about it is it feels like a good mix of the horror and the combat at the same time.
Exactly. I feel like the factory brings all of the different elements from every single part of the game into one area. And although I think that area overstays its welcome just slightly, it's a little long. Having it close out with the tank is amazing. Like that, like every setting is awesome. And I like how diverse it is. And then also just going back to the village and going back to somewhere familiar, I think is really neat and like a good design decision to be like, okay, you're going to come back here. You're familiar with it. You feel safe here. It's like basically your save room, but for an entire village, I guess, or at least that like main hub section for sure. Which is nice to have like a good, reliable place, you know, for sure you are going to be fine at.
Yeah. Once you get through that opening sort of intro to the village with all the werewolves, and it reminds me of the opening of Planet of the Apes when they're like riding around on the horses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're all wrangling you up. Same sort of vibes. I feel like they definitely took inspiration from the OG Planet of the Apes. But yeah, after you finish that, the village does sort of feel like your safe zone. You've got what's the merchant's name? The
Duke.
The Duke. You got him sitting up in the central sort of area that connects to all the different smaller locations within the village. You've got the church. You've got a lot of like areas that you can kind of explore and go.
Yeah,
find
and
stuff.
You've become so familiar with a lot of those spaces that like you kind of know what, or at least you feel like you know what to expect until they kind of like throw some unexpected things in there sometimes. But I feel like even then, it's like you know how to manage that stuff by that time. Yeah, and I like how it feels so like I don't know. It's feels obviously it's connected and everything. But I feel like you get kind of those really cool aha moments when you're like, oh, this is going over here. Like, I can't really think of one specific example, but I like how that world is all connected too. So,
yeah, I agree. I want while we're talking about there's a lot of story stuff I would like to dive into, but I feel like we should table that for the moment because I feel like there might be more to discuss there. Let's chat about gameplay for a bit because I really feel like a lot of this is obviously built off of the back of Resident Evil 7. There's a lot of similarities. They've upped the action here. It is more of a shooter this time around rather than a survival horror game. And really, 7 was pretty... Once you got out of the main first home there with Jack, I feel like it was a lot more of a shooter in some senses. But this one is... you're firing away far more often at enemies in this game. But how do you guys feel like they combine the increased action with the puzzles and stuff like that? That's kind of something that I feel like you and I talked about, Max, with like Code Veronica specifically. That was more of an action-focused Resident Evil game that obviously still put a heavy emphasis on puzzles and things like that. How do you feel like it was handled with Village for the most part?
I think I feel it's almost difficult to speak to that from a initial perspective because I wrote this down. It feels snappier and less scary having played this game before. Like the castle, I knew, oh, I got to go up here. I got to go this way. The daughters are going to be like this. I got to kill them. So like the stuff I got hung up on the first time around, I wasn't hung up on. So I didn't feel didn't feel as puzzly to me. There were 2 puzzles, and I didn't write them down actually, which I should have, that I actually had to look up a solution for again. Oh, one was that initial chase with Heisenberg, and he's dropping the saw blades on you in the very beginning of the game, and you have to find the one tiny corner to like tuck in, and that was just, I was like, I don't know where to go, and so I had to look that up. And there was another one that I'm not quite sure of.
I had to look that one up too.
Yeah, it just, that felt a little unfair. But the rest of it I didn't struggle with, and so it was more, how am I going to engage in this space and navigate my way through it with this knowledge? And there was a confidence with that this time around. And I enjoyed that. That actually made the game feel more fun. It's that loop that hooked me in Resident Evil 3 and that I see in other games in the series of, I can do this faster, I can do this better, I can use less ammo, I can get a higher score, so to speak. And in a trophy sense, I can do these more difficult challenges. If we weren't churning through these games at the pace that we are for this show and, playing other things, and like Resident Evil 4 Remake just came out, like Mike said, like I probably could see myself going through and like chipping away at the trophies on this like I did with 3. There is that gameplay hook that comes with replaying the game that feels satisfying, and I get it for Resident Evil.
I mean, just to jump off that real quick, Mike, before you jump in here.
Sure.
Yeah, I felt the same way, because when we did 7, I talked openly about how I replayed that game 2 or 3 times, I think, ended up getting to platinum. And I felt the same way after I played this one. I really was like, I want to do another couple runs here. I want to knock out everything that there is to knock out to get all the trophies and things like that. And I only stopped myself from doing that because, 1, the trophy list requires you to do mercenary stuff to get to platinum, and I didn't like that. 2, though, obviously we just have other games to play, and it was time to move on. But yeah, there is this sort of, I don't know, these games are constructed in such a way, whether they're more survival horror focused or action focused, you always feel like you can optimize your run in some sort of manner, and you can always go faster through this. And these games are very much, like I said, that first playthrough I did on this was 8 to 9 hours, but this second one was closer to 4.5, 5, and I just feel like I could get it down to 2 or 3, or I could move through the game even faster, especially if I have unlimited ammo on my weapons and things like that. Like there's a lot of optimization here, which I really like. As far as puzzles, I really didn't feel like there was anything too inventive in this game on that front, which is fine. There aren't many puzzles throughout the whole Resident Evil series that I can think of that are like, that's a fantastic puzzle that really challenged me in this sort of way. I mean, they're all of the same sort of variety, run around the castle, get these different masks, put them in the spots where they go. Like it's all very pretty straightforward most of the time. Examine the items that you get and things like that. So nothing too out of the ordinary in that front. But there's just, I don't know, there's something about how the puzzles are always styled in Resident Evil games that I generally like. So it's not that I want to say they were bad in this game. It's just they were what I would expect from Resident Evil at this point. So
yeah, I mean, it's that like Metroidvania kind of thing. I mean, even though it's not that kind of game, obviously, but it's like you see a door, you can open it at some point, but you just need to find the piece. And then when you finally find the piece, you're like, I can finally go through this thing that I've been staring at this entire time. Yeah. And I feel like it scratches that kind of itch, I suppose. For me, like I think the game controls great. I mean, it gives you enough mobility to get away from things, but kind of still constricts your movement enough to not get too comfortable in certain situations, especially when you're in tighter spaces. But generally, I mean, I think I echo the same sentiments you guys say. I think, the first time around, I had talked about it before. Scary games scare me a whole bunch. And it's hard for me to get through a lot of this stuff if I don't feel powerful, I guess. So like that first playthrough took me quite a lot of sessions, 30-minute sessions of playing the game to get through it. But This time around, I, again, just had more confidence. I've seen everything that this game has to offer. Also, if you play in third person, you kind of know when the scary stuff's going to happen because it transitions back into first person for some of the cutscenes, or most of the cutscenes. So you kind of knew when something was going to happen anyway. But yeah, I think generally it still plays great. I didn't really have too many issues with it. Like, technically, it's still sound. It's a beautiful game. But yeah.
I think this is a good spot to talk about it. It seems to make sense. The VR mode, which between the three of us, I'm the only one that's played it. I think Logan technically has access to it through work, but hasn't played yet.
I could play it, yeah. I have access to PSVR 2. I just have not tried it yet. I will at some point.
Yeah, you definitely should, because it is bonkers. It changes the game, and once I have a more dedicated space to play in VR here in a few months, I plan on probably dabbling with it, especially when this Resident Evil 4 remake VR thing, whatever that may be, comes out. I think that would be a really good time to dive back in, because
I feel like the Resident just to say this real quick, I'm sorry. I feel like the Resident Evil 4 VR mode is just going to be like one of the shooting galleries in VR
yes.
or something like that. That is my expectation for that.
That is what I've been saying, because they have not said it's the full game. But having played about half, 2/3 of Resident Evil 7 in VR back when that came out, playing Resident Evil 4 on Quest 2, and now dabbling in Village, it's my favorite way to play a Resident Evil game. And I know on PC there are mods for 2 and 3, which sound and have looked really, really cool from what I've seen.
You want to go look at Mr. X in person and Nemesis?
Yeah, it's wild, man. And
I don't. That sounds scary.
You actually load the pistol, drop the magazine, put in a new one, slide the rail back, all that stuff,
Wild.
Which sounds tedious in some sense, but it just feels so natural in VR. The aiming down the sights, or just reaching and grabbing things on your person, is by far the most accurate I've had in a VR game. When I reach for a pistol magazine clip, that's what I come back with, or the knife. And it does lead to some cool gameplay moments, because they don't want to break the game in a way of, well, if you drop this knife, like, you're going to have to like walk over there, bend over and pick it up. So like you have unlimited throwing knives, essentially, where you can just take this. Ethan has this knife sheath on his arm, and so you just pull the knife out and you can just throw it and a new one will spawn. And so you have unlimited throwing knives. It's just, holding the flashlight, where you can hold it like with your hand down or your hand up, over or underhand. Totally just feels so natural and great. And I highly encourage people who do have PSVR 2 or have access to it to play that way. I wish I could have played the whole thing for the show that way. The space and the time of life just didn't work out, but it is by far, I think, the best way to play the game.
Well, you're talking about one alternative method of play. I wanted to ask you guys what you thought of the third-person mode, because obviously this game was designed with first-person in mind, but then they totally recreated it for third-person, which I dabbled with, and I thought it was pretty solid. Again, there's been a lot of other third-person Resident Evil games. I guess that would be my question, is you guys played the whole game. Do you feel like the third-person mode that they tacked on here is as good as the games that are natively in third person, which, RE2, 3, 4 remake most recently?
I think it works. Yes, it's good. I think you should play it in first person if you're going to play it, though. I think I personally, like, if you're playing the game for the first time, you should definitely play it in first person, because, like I said before, like, those cutscenes, like, you're in third person, it'll just zoom back into first person. And so any scary moment or like cool moment, you won't really get the same kind of surprise, because, like, for example, when your hand gets cut off, when you're about to pull the handle for like the door, if you're playing that in third person, you'll like start to pull it and then it'll just zoom into first person again. And then your hand gets cut off. Like, that kind of unexpected stuff is what made some of those moments, a lot of those cool moments, like really great. And in that case, you kind of lose that surprise and stuff entirely when you play in third person. So I would say for like a second playthrough, it totally works and it's great and it's fine. But yeah, definitely preferred third person or first person.
Yeah, it shows that the game was obviously designed first person the first time around, but it is impressive that the game structurally, not from a narrative perspective, because they didn't even rework the cutscenes in VR. You know, the scene in the beginning of the game where Ethan is being dragged out of the house, you're just standing in your living room and Ethan is laying on the floor. So like your head is supposed to, it just doesn't feel right at all. But it is impressive from a game design angle that this game works in third person or VR or first person. I think that is really cool. And I would love to see Capcom take a game from the ground up and design it with both in mind. Whether that's cutscenes, you know, work in either mode in a natural way, or just they're both available at launch from the start, because clearly their technology is capable of all of this. And I've talked about that extensively, but it shows their chops, I think, really well. This is any type of Resident Evil experience you want, you can get it in Village. Whether you want I guess the only one you can't get is tank controls and predetermined camera angles. But it is, from Resident Evil 4 onward, if you want that type of experience in any of them, play Village. You'll get a type of gameplay experience that you could have gotten in any of the games.
I wonder if part of the reason why maybe they didn't redo cutscenes, other than obviously probably cost money and, you know, a lot more work, a lot more time, all that stuff. I wonder if part of it has to do with the faceless nature of Ethan and not
oh my gosh
ever show, because they would have to go through tons of different like angles and whatever to figure out a way to even not show his face and stuff, which, you know, I guess we'll probably talk about when we talk about the DLC, which is that's some
oh my
stuff
gosh
that happens
can
there.
we just quickly just touch on the fact that we can't see Ethan's face, and I think it's the greatest kind of just running joke of the whole game. There are so many times where if you turn your camera, like his body just turns away from it, like he's shy. Cutscenes, especially in the Shadows of Rose DLC, like the strategic placement of objects to hide this man's face, I find hysterical. It's the greatest. I think it's so fun. It's so goofy. There's almost a Japanese humor to it that you would just get in a Japanese game. It's like, you can't see this person's face. It's the silent protagonist, but faceless and instead.
And not silent.
Yeah, and not silent. But you get what I mean. Like, it's just, there's like a joke.
Yeah.
It's like everyone else can see his face, but you can't.
I love that. Like, I'm really glad they've committed to. Well, I've heard some fans be like, why don't they just show his face? I'm like, dude, that's not the point. Like, he's supposed to be a conduit for the player, and they're leaning into it so much so that, like, you're not supposed to see him. Like, that's the point.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I don't want to know what Ethan looks like. I think it's so funny that, especially how close we get sometimes.
Yeah. There's moments where they're like, oh, you're going to show it? Nope, never mind. Never mind.
I want to speak to, I mean, just speaking to the first person stuff for a moment. I do think that this game, some of the moments, this is an exceptional first person game is what I was going to say. And I think we talked a lot about that with 7, about how they really proved that first person was a place that this series could go when a lot of people were questioning it at the time, whether or not the series could make the jump to that style of play. And they really have shown with both 7 and Village here that Resident Evil in first person is excellent. And I think the thing that I should mention here, and I am like 90% certain about this, but I'm pretty sure Capcom has said they are moving away from first person now with future games, and they're going back to third person, like with Resident Evil 9 and beyond, or whatever 9 ends up becoming. And they talked about how that with in regard to the Shadow of Rose DLC, I think specifically, like, the first person stuff was tied to Ethan. And so with Ethan being written out now, they're going to go back to third person and stuff moving forward. And that kind of bums me out because I think they've done such a good job with both of these games. Like there's a different sense of horror in these games that I think comes about through the first person perspective compared to like 2 Remake with Mr. X chasing you. There's just a different vibe. And I think they've been able to really, like some of those moments we talk about in the Dollhouse that are much creepier and do lean into more modern, take or riff off of more modern horror games like Amnesia or PT and stuff like that. Like that's only, I think, that's not possible. I mean, it's not that it's not impossible, but I would imagine you guys have played through this game both in first person and third person. Was the Dollhouse section creepier in first person, I would imagine, compared to third?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I thought so, at least.
probably, but again, I knew what was happening in there.
Yeah.
And so it was less scary. And we'll talk about the DLC later.
Yes.
But what they do in that space in third person, I think was scarier than the baby stuff in the base game. So
yes,
it depends. I think it depends on the type of horror that was going on. Both not wildly different, but 2 different types of scenario that leveraged the original camera's perspective of each. I mean, it is.
But in both of those moments, I know what you're talking about in the
Yeah.
DLC. It's very that style of camera, third person, I think is
vital
specific
to that
to
horror.
why that moment works. Exactly.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the baby stuff, I think it was probably scarier, like overall. And I dreaded coming back to it. Don't get me wrong. I actually remember getting to that part early in the morning. And I was like, I don't really want to play this right now. I don't want the screaming, creepy baby. But, I think it just depends. Like knowing what was going to go on, I think makes it difficult for me to properly judge my response to it.
I'm kind of 2 minds of it. Whereas, I feel like when Resident Evil 7 was coming out, I think probably fans were like upset with it because maybe it felt like they were chasing like what other horror games have been doing, because there was so much success with first person horror. I mean, it's an incredible way to do horror. I mean, you are experiencing it firsthand. Like it feels that way.
Well, PT had even come out, I think, by that time that 7 had released.
Yeah.
So like a lot of horror was transitioning to first person at that time for sure.
Yeah. And so like having it all tied to Ethan, I'm kind of cool with that. Like it makes his story like completely unique from the rest of Resident Evil. Like his character is in first person. Like you cannot.
I mean, yes, but you can't.
You can, but like it is meant to be played in first person. That is the experience that you're having with that, and I'm kind of cool with that being tied to that. So, I mean, but then also they kind of showed that they could do that horror still. Like, obviously, you guys already talked about that Dollhouse part. Like for the Shadow of Rose DLC, like they could still do that kind of horror in third person. Like there are still effective ways to do that. So I'm not really like too bummed, because I feel like if they are going to stick with like that actual like real scary horror stuff, like I mean they've even done that with Resident Evil 2 Remake. I feel like that game is incredibly scary, and that's mostly just because of sound design. I mean, if they just stick with that kind of stuff, I think they'll have something just as scary or whatever in that case. But
more than anything moving forward, I kind of wish they wouldn't have shot down the potential of doing first person again. I guess I just would have liked to not know what they're going to do next. And so for them to have said like, nope, first person's not on the table anymore is kind of like, well, that doesn't make me sad necessarily, but it just kind of like pigeonholes them to one type of game that we have seen a lot. I mean, most Resident Evil games have been third person, at least for the better part of the last 20 years.
So I've been looking around for that quote or that source on that, and I haven't found something definitive quite yet. It seems to stem from an interview with IGN from the Tokyo Game Show back in last year of 2022. And it sounds like, I guess, the Shadows of Rose DLC concludes the Winters family saga, is the terminology used, So those characters are all done, apparently, according to Capcom, at least at this point. And so that's taken on the meaning of we would leave first person behind. So far, at least in the Googling I've done, that we would just return to third person and a new cast of characters or old favorites. So that seems to be where it's stemming from, but I haven't found anything definitive yet.
Yeah, I just looked it up here myself. And so, yeah, maybe they could do first person, but it does. I mean, even the end of this game says the father's story is now complete or something like that, I believe.
Yeah.
So they make it clear that Ethan's done. He's not getting a trilogy. He's getting a duology.
The Capcom's language says the Winters family, as in Rose 2, which feels very strange.
Which is weird, and we'll talk about that. Talk about the DLC here in a minute. So we've been talking about Ethan here a lot throughout this episode, but we have not talked about much of the story of this game, at least not outside of some like brief references to certain things. And I think that the story of this game is it's one of the reasons why I like it a lot, but it is very much all over the dang place. So much so that I almost don't know where to start, because obviously coming off of the end of 7, there's a lot going on here with Mia, and then Mia gets offed in the opening 5 minutes of this game, and then there's a baby with superpowers, and then the baby gets torn apart and put in little bottles. There's just all, like, this game is, like, I think you mentioned, I believe in Code Veronica episode Max, that one of the writers on that game talked about how he wrote the entire script while he was drinking, and that
specifically just the Wesker report, which explains why Wesker is alive. That's not Code Veronica itself, just this DVD bonus video.
Okay. Well, they may have taken a page out of that playbook when they wrote this game, because it feels like, but it's great at the same time. I think, like, it is, again, Resident Evil to me is inherently campy, and this game is psycho stuff. I don't know. Where do you guys want to even tap in here with what happens?
I guess, like, for me, I have not played 7.
Okay.
I've played like the beginning of it. I killed.
So you witnessed the key moment of 7, I guess, which is he dies.
Yes,
Spoilers.
I did witness the key moment. I got up to the lady that's in the house,
the greenhouse,
that's made of flies or something,
Marguerite,
or spiders or something. Yeah, I got to her and I'm like, this is too scary, guys. I can't play this game. It's too much. So yeah, I got to that part and I stopped playing the game. I'll probably revisit it though at some point. I will revisit that game soon. But so coming into this, I guess, like, honestly, it's less about the actual story itself and more about like all the things that are like all the lore bits and stuff that make it so complicated. But the story itself is like really simple, I guess. At the end of the day, it's just like, your wife gets sniped by Chris Redfield. You're like,
there's shot in the face 10 times point blank in front of your eyes.
And you're like, what the heck? And then your baby, and they take you, but then you get or your baby gets kidnapped, and you find out that she's been separated, and you're trying to put her back together, is like what the story is at the end of the day, and try to save her, which is crazy that you could think you could save her when her body parts are all in different cubicle thingies, and you have to put them in a machine. I don't know. That kind of stuff is weird, but like, the basis of the story is super simple. Like, there's nothing really, like, they kind of tell you and like everything you kind of need to know from 7. And then from then on, like, you're just experiencing what they have here in front of you, which then gets into crazy stuff like that I personally would not understand, like at the end with all the stuff, how it connects and the deeper lore of Resident Evil. I know they mentioned like the Arklay Mountains, which I know is from the first thing, and like with Miranda and stuff, and that kind of stuff kind of flows, like goes. I just don't know what's going on there. Maybe I do now if I play it now and then I look back at it.
You would,
but even at the moment of like when I played it the second time, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, obviously it is tying back to, because I knew the settings of each one. I'm like, obviously this stuff is tying back to old Resident Evil games, which is really cool fan servicey stuff that is awesome that they could tie it in that way and in such a interesting way, I guess.
I don't know if it's all that interesting.
Well, how they do it is kind of whatever. I mean, it's just a bunch of notes.
I like that Chris is the one who discovers it all. That's the element of it. I don't hate some of the revelations at the end. Revelations, Resident Evil reference.
Yeah.
No. This stuff's the best.
I like how they make it interconnected, but it feels like every couple games they did a similar thing in Code Veronica, where it's like Resident Evil 1, it's like, oh, Spencer, he's kind of the guy behind Umbrella, and he's the one doing all this. And then you get to Code Veronica, it's like, no, it was actually the Ashfords that were one of the key people responsible for Umbrella.
Just actually the Ashfords. Ashfords were there.
Yeah,
and now we know Miranda was there. And I think that's super cool because that's hundreds of years and she's there and this fungus is taking over her brain and all she wants is her kid back. I think, and maybe this is just because I'm so new to Resident Evil on the whole for this season and we've just played all of this so close together, but like I'm riding a Resident Evil lore high right now. And when we got to that lab this time around and I was reading everything, my mind was like, oh my gosh, she was there. They were finding the progenitor virus and she's out here dealing with this fungus thing. And I just thought it was so cool. I really, really enjoyed that lore revelation in the part that, we've talked about. There's always a lab. I like that there's still a lab, and this lab's been here for hundreds of years, and there's more things. There's also some interesting stuff with the BSAA being bioweapon soldiers this time, invading the space, so like that has some future implications, I imagine.
I was going to say, they don't really touch on that too much until it's kind of like one of the final kickers of the game. It sets up where 9 could go.
Yeah. I also, though, think outside of the extended lore here, I kind of really enjoyed the scientific-y reasons why the bosses are the way they are, because they've been infected with the Kdow
or whatever.
This live fungus hive mind kind of thing. And so
it interacts with the megamycete, I think.
Yeah,
like
so the megamycete's like this big brain. But, explains why Lady D is a tall vampire lady. It's because she has a rare blood disease that, combined with wild growth or whatever, means she has to, eat humans to stay stable. Or, with Heisenberg being able to control metal, or the doll lady controlling her dolls, she was taking it out of her and putting it in her dolls. I like the way that they try to ground this scientifically. Same sort of way they explain why Ethan can just have his hand chopped off and put it back on. It's because the man's made of mold, which is the silliest thing ever written in Resident Evil, at least as far as I've played. The man is just filled with fungus. He's just a moldy boy. And I think that's so cool, and how they hint at it throughout the games. Actually, the more I remember the first time I played this game, I just thought, poor Ethan's hands. They just really stab him, rip him, chop him off. His hands just get brutalized in this game.
Well, Lady D drinks his blood at one point, and she says something like, you're
getting ready to go bad or something.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's something along those lines. And so they do drop a bunch of hints throughout the game with it. And they even do going back to 7. I know we keep alluding to the chopped off hand, but we talked in our 7 episode, he gets his leg chopped off in that game in an optional cutscene. And he just reattaches it willy-nilly. So they've been dropping hints to it. I don't know if this was a grand plan they had. Maybe in 7 its inclusion was just meant to be a goofy thing, but now it's come full circle and they've given a reason for it. But yeah, it's Ethan as a character is so bewildering. I still have so many questions, I guess, about so his wife, what's his wife's name? Mia. So she procreated with a mold man. So she's the product of a mold-loving relationship. Like, Rose is the product, I should say. Mia, I guess, had sex with a mold boy and then had a mold child.
Essentially, they had superpowers, but Mia would have known this.
Yes, which makes it even more like head scratching. And also, Miranda can shapeshift into Mia, which is why she gets blown away at the start, which I kind of like. I mean, I don't think anybody, even before this game came out, I don't think anybody thought like, oh, Chris is going to be evil. And like that was kind of what they tried to do with the marketing for this game, and it was clear that was never going to be the case. But yeah, there's a lot happening in this game. But I do agree with you, Michael. At the same time, I think what works about this game is that, and in typical Resident Evil fashion, I think this is one of the stronger aspects of the series as a whole, is it is so character focused. Like the characters are central to everything. And then there's lore and world building and backstory and stuff like that, which Max was talking about here at the end of the game. But for the most part, it is just these characters, or whether it be Chris, Jill, Leon, like there's central characters, and then the villains and stuff as well. And sometimes they don't hit, or sometimes the side characters don't hit. I think of like Steve from Code Veronica. But like in this game, I think the cast is pretty top notch across the board, whether it be between Lady D, Heisenberg. I don't think Miranda gets as much time, honestly, to feel like a compelling villain. That would be kind of my one problem with this game, because you Max talked about how you like that she does have roots going that far back, and I wish they would have done a little bit more with that. Like her motivations aren't explained until like the 11th hour, essentially. Like they, and that's kind of my problem with what happens at the end of the game. It is just so dumped on you as the player in these text logs, and fleshing out her motivations and fleshing out why she's like this. And because in all those various text logs, it establishes she has a child, her child died, how she found the Megamycete, and that she knew Spencer, how Spencer got the inspiration for Umbrella. Like there is a lot of stuff that is like just thrown at you very, very quickly. And that stuff's all fine, but they could have done more with it in the game itself. And I think that's my one issue with it, is like her children are so front and center throughout the rest of the game that she just kind of falls into the background. But I like, Heisenberg and Lady D as characters and stuff like that too. So
I do think there is a bit more fleshing out about Mother Miranda's motivations, or at least her objective of a daughter, doing something with Rose and her power to resurrect something. Heisenberg hints at it, especially when you're in the factory. He's talking about how they're just pawns and they were used. Heisenberg's factory has notes and documents talking about how he's building up an army, and Mordu talks about experimenting with the fungus, the Kodu, or I don't know. There's a lot of funky things here. That's how the werewolves come about. So I do think there's some world building of just Miranda and her forces in general throughout the world, and kind of her objective and those things. But yeah, it is the same trope of here's all the plot twist, right? The narrative plot twist, and it's always in the lab at the end in a bunch of documents. The twist never really comes in a cutscene, I guess, besides the fact that you died and you're made of fungus.
Well, the other thing too that I wanted to mention is like, and this is where my disappointment with Miranda comes through more, is like she's also responsible for Evelyn in the previous game, and Evelyn has ties to her as well. And so to make Miranda kind of the core villain of both of these games, and then to just not do a whole lot with her other than just, I want your daughter to recreate my daughter. Like there was more to explore there with her, I think. And if they would have made her more, obviously she's name dropped constantly throughout the game, that a lot of people around the village, or I guess the old lady is her. But she's name dropped quite a bit throughout the game, and she is the central figure that you are kind of going to have to deal with, because Heisenberg and Lady D and all the others, Moreau, they're all mentioning her, but she does not directly appear outside of. There's the one cutscene at the start of the game where they're all together before you get chased, and then you don't see her again until, I believe, the very end of the game after you deal with Heisenberg. And so that's, again, where I just feel like there was more. Like, they could have sprinkled her in more over the course of this game, I think, and she would have, she could have served a bigger purpose. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think they could have done, if maybe not show her more, but do more things like how she was like the old lady, like right in the beginning. Like maybe make her, because she has the ability to shapeshift, maybe she was, I don't know, like a crow that was hanging out that you keep on seeing throughout the entire game or something like that. Or something like that.
Or she's the Duke.
or she is the Duke or something something like that in that sort of way. That way it kind of connects it like, oh, she has been watching you this entire time. She has been there the entire time, if not actually like present like with her normal self, I guess.
Yeah. I did I don't know if there's more character/story stuff you guys wanted to talk about in particular, but I did want to say, at least before we left that section, a fun fact that I picked up on in the game and then had to double check. The voice actor for Chris is the same voice actor for Carlos in the Resident Evil 3 remake, so Carlos and Chris are one and the same.
That tracks now that I think about it. Like, I can totally hear that in my brain without even...
There was some delivery at the lake. I was like,
okay,
that sounds like Carlos. And so that's when I checked, and I was right. So yes, the voice actor for Chris in Village is the same as the voice actor for Carlos.
Well, I did want to actually bring up Chris and how he's handled in this game. I feel like he's one of the characters that we haven't touched on, and obviously you play as him for a chunk of the game.
In a very Call of Duty set piece.
Chris of Duty.
Yes, which is great. I like that part quite a bit, actually. But Chris in this game, I don't know. Even he, I feel like, is not as prominent as he potentially could have been. I don't know. It's a weird thing to balance, because I get that they want to make this an Ethan game through and through, and they don't want to have Chris take over the spotlight. But Chris is in the opening, and then he doesn't appear again until the lake, I believe, is the first time you see him.
And you just see him, otherwise.
And then other than that, he really doesn't show up again until the late sections of the game. Other than that, I think one of my big questions with this game, and it feels like something where they just kind of wrote themselves into a corner, and they're like, well, this is what we want to do. We want to pitch it as Chris is maybe the bad guy, so we're going to have him off Mia, who's not really Mia at the start of the game. Because you even get, basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is, why didn't Chris just tell Ethan this? And that's even a question that one of Chris's companions broaches to him, like late in the game, if you are listening over the as he's talking via the comms during the Chris of Duty section that Michael said. One of them's like, why didn't you just tell Ethan? You could have just looped him in. And he's like, yeah, I think he says like, yeah, maybe I should, but I was like afraid that how he'd handle it. I don't know, something to that effect. And I think that is a little bit of a maybe plot hole, like, hey, why wouldn't they just tell Chris that like this woman is after his child, and his child is unique, and these things are happening? And I guess the other questions, and this isn't really touched on a ton, but it's kind of a subtle thing that I like with Ethan, is that they establish in the early portion of this game that he's been like training with Chris a ton, and that's how he's more proficient with weapons now. It's implied that like he's not just this scrub anymore. He has been trained by Chris. He has a lot of military expertise now, and that's how he can kind of handle himself in this situation. So like, why wouldn't Chris then fill him in on what's happening? And instead he just offs Mia in front of him, is like, you don't know what you're talking about, Ethan. It's like, what? Like, it just, again, it feels like one of those things where it's like Capcom wanted to intentionally play with fan expectations, and so they did it even though it didn't make a whole lot of sense narratively. So
I correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it said or implied that Mia was the one making Chris not tell Ethan? Like, everyone was trying to keep the secret that Ethan was dead away from Ethan. So I think that's like,
well, you could have not told Chris or Ethan that he's dead, and could have still told him that like, hey, some crazy woman's after your family. You should be in the know-how. We're gonna perform a sting operation and kill the person that looks like your wife in front of you.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. You know, why is my daughter so important? She has superpowers. How does she have superpowers? Because you're made of fungus. I'm not saying it's great writing or it's great
He's
defense.
made of mold, not fungus. Last of Us boy.
Mold is fungus.
I don't know.
Pretty sure mold is a
same?
fungus. It is. It's not the great. I'm not defending it. I do think there was just like a write-off excuse of why they aren't explaining it, because it's pretty silly. It's pretty silly to go this long.
And yeah, and again, it's one of those things where it's like I'm not staying up at night. Like, why did they do this? I don't really
Tossing
care.
and turning over.
You got to keep the player interested somehow, right? You need to have some sort of mystery there in order for you to want to keep on going. Because if you know all that stuff, then how do they keep you going and trying to figure out what's going on? I feel like if you get that information right at the get-go, I mean, what other surprises other than like Ethan putting his hand on and stuff like that do you really get? Those moments aren't even as good then at that point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't
Last question about story and character stuff before we move on is I did just want to ask, how do you guys feel about Ethan's death and then the time jump at the end of the game with Rose, obviously, and we'll talk more about that with Shadows of Rose here, which we're going to touch on more fully, but I guess just how do you feel about the ending of the game and then choosing to kill him off, I guess for good, because he was technically already dead, but yeah.
It's silly. Like, it's very goofy the way he goes about it. Like, I'm not gonna give up. You know, I haven't. Who knows what happens in Resident Evil 5 or 6 at this time. But we haven't really seen a main character in these games, like, bite the dust. And it's interesting to see them introduce a new character in the previous game and then kill them in the second one. It's interesting just from a reboot perspective, which 7 essentially was to a degree. And it makes me wonder about the future of the series in that sense. But him, basically blowing everything up and being like this limpy little mold man, and Mia's actually alive and, take care of her. Promise I'll always be there. I'll protect you or whatever, typical stuff. But Ethan's sacrifice is pretty goofy in hindsight.
I'm not against it, I guess. Like, I don't think it's, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, if I question, like, what would I have done differently, I guess, like, what would it be more compelling if he had stayed alive? And also, like, what purpose does he have after this story ends, I guess? I mean, then he's just around, like, what is he going to do afterwards, So, I mean, granted, he would have, like, with the time jump, like you mentioned, Logan, like, would Ethan even still be around at that point then, too? Like, would he just be dead anyway? So, yeah. I mean, I don't know. And then the time jump, too, is really weird, especially with the DLC stuff, because, I mean, I don't know. We don't have to talk about the DLC right now, but I think that time jump and how the DLC goes about, like, it kind of makes the DLC kind of, you don't need to play it at the end of the day. Because of how they position the timing of it. So
they share the same ending cutscene at the end of the DLC as they do at the end of the base game, which is
that was very
extremely
very
bizarre.
The mystery is still there and who that shadowy figure is and how that plays out with the rest of, like, what's going to happen in the next part of the Resident Evil series and stuff. And if Rose isn't part of that, according to that interview or whatever, if the Winters family story, like, what's it's really weird. I do not know what is going to go on with whatever the ninth entry will end up being, especially with how that ends in it with that kind of information, I suppose.
I mean, let's just talk about Shadows of Rose. We'll get back to. I know we're going to touch on the music, but I mean, we're talking about Shadows of Rose naturally, so let's do it. We don't all play the DLC here, which is obviously a first time for all of us. None of us have done before. I guess just general takeaways. I don't want to spend. Not trying to rush through this section, but I don't think there's as much to talk about. I think largely it's fine. Like I didn't hate anything here. I don't know. I honestly, my big takeaway is this. It really felt like Rose was poised to be like the new character moving forward in 9, and I thought that they were going to do that, and then this DLC made me not really care about Rose much at all. and revisiting all these old locations didn't really do a lot for me. I think some of the mechanics are cool with some of her abilities and things like that. I don't know. Largely, I just thought this expansion was okay.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I kind of said it before already. Like, I agree that I thought it was fine. I think it had really cool moments. Obviously, the dollhouse moment is a standout moment, not just in the DLC, but like that entire game. It is absolutely terrifying.
The puzzles are really good too. I like the ones with all the dolls and figuring out where they go, and like I thought that was enjoyable as well.
I did not like the stealth section, although I think the environment was kind of neat and different, and at least
where everything was big.
Give me like Little Nightmares vibes for sure. Like I don't know if any of you guys have played those games.
Yeah, it kind of had that vibe for sure, and like I like that they did play around with some of the environments, but for the most part, I think you had said it while we were playing it, but like it feels small. Like even though we've been in these, like we've been in all of these settings in different environments before, but like for some reason it all feels smaller and more like tighter, and I don't know, it doesn't feel as sprawling as like the castle, for example, doesn't feel as sprawling as it was when you play it in the original game. When you play it here, it feels all like super tight and like you're getting forced into sections, whereas like you're not really exploring like how you had that like the freedom to explore in the original game or whatever. So, but generally, yeah, I thought it was good. Again, like how it ends up panning out, like you don't need to play it. You see the ending of this DLC in the end of the game, like the base game, and then also like why did they even introduce Rose? Like in the first place, what's the bigger picture here with her? Is she in fact going to be part of Resident Evil 9? I mean, I feel like she kind of has to in some capacity. Even if you don't play as her, I guess, maybe some sort of supporting role or something. But yeah, it's just interesting. It's really, really weird, but kind of good. Like it's kind of interesting. I liked it.
It's is it the first? It's the first piece of Resident Evil DLC that I've played, I believe, so far. And I know we'll be playing some for 5 and possibly 6. But this is my first exposure to some expansion content in the game, the series on the whole. I did kind of enjoy the reuse of characters and assets. It was like, for example, the Duke is evil, right? He represents the kind of villain in the first area, which is the castle. I thought that was kind of neat. But about the castle feeling smaller, I think it's because more of it's like cut off and there's a lot of black goo everywhere, where it just limits where you can physically go. So there's other places, but they've even shrunk it and just tightened it up by changing the environment design. I did get some BioShock-y vibes from this DLC a little bit, particularly in the castle, because there is a use of little CRT monitors everywhere, and Rose has powers with her hand, a la plasmids, and then there's a bunch of rabbit imagery in the beginning as well. So that gave me a lot of BioShock-y kind of vibes, not in the this is as great as BioShock, just a lot of design cues from that, just visually speaking, which was interesting, I thought. I wrote this down, not a fan of basically rehashing the dollhouse gimmick, which was at that particular moment of the note, just essentially an escape room of finding these pieces, putting them back together, and then they reveal the mannequin weeping angel bit, Doctor Who kind of vibe, and immediately it became terrifying again. I think actually, Mike, you and I got by the same jump scare. Dude. Where like at one point, the mannequin shows up in the hallway and you're like, okay, there it is. And you come back to that hallway later and it's not there and you're like, it's fine. I mean, it's moving, but it's fine. And then you open the next door and it's right there, and totally, it got me for sure.
That got me too, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Dude, right when it showed up in the hallway, I'm like, dude, I don't know. I don't know if I can play this. This is way too much for me right now.
I think it was definitely the scariest part, actually, of Olive Village in general, was these dolls chasing you, and I'm very concerned about what they'll come up with later. Overall, the whole DLC really is kind of more psychological horror based. The imagery of Rose dying a bunch of different ways, these dolls all trying to kill her. I think the ending the ending falls really hard flat because it's essentially the same ending, that Mother Miranda is still trying to get her daughter back. And
well, not only that, but like it was telegraphed from moment one that Michael was gonna be Ethan. Yeah. Like the second it was, it was like, okay, well, sure. It's clear that this is gonna be him finally interacting with his daughter, and not only that, I'm sorry, I wanted to mention this real quick because it was fresh in my mind, but the whole thrust of her like wanting to get rid of her powers because people bully me at school because I have powers. It's like, what is this plot device here for her to get rid of her powers? Like they could have gone with literally any other thing. Like, I just want to be normal. I just want to live a normal life.
She could have gone with, I don't want mold inside my body.
Yeah. Instead, it's just like, I've been bullied and I want friends.
Well, I think it is that like, oh, I do just want to be like, I want to have a normal life, but because of her age, it's like, it's also because she's getting bullied, I guess. I think the main thrust is she just wants to be normal, but how they depict it is like, yes, it's very stereotypical teenage drama.
Yeah, the way they chose to depict that is very strange, because it could have just been like, these powers have been nothing but bad news for my family. I don't want this to haunt the Winters family name moving forward. I don't want to have this hanging over me the same way it did my father, blah, 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 blah. Like stuff like that. It would be like, okay, sure, that makes sense. Instead, it's, I get picked on at school. Wah, I don't want to have telekinesis or whatever the heck. It's like, I don't know, very silly stuff. Like, if I had superpowers and somebody's like, oh, you nerd, you got powers, I'd be like, okay. Like, I don't know. It's just a very strange, odd way in which it was explained that she wanted to go through this whole situation. And the cutscenes at the start are a little, like, they feel rushed too. Like, doesn't it just open? She's on a park bench and some random dude shows up. He's like, hey, I figured out how you can get rid of your powers, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, oh, we're just going here. We're running. Like, it's just...
Yeah, it's implied that he like works with Chris or something, but turns out that was all Mother Miranda anyway.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And then I don't know. It's the final boss and stuff. I mean, it is just a rehash fighting Miranda again. The final boss I didn't think was terrible, and getting together with Ethan was, I don't know, there was some like modicum of like enjoyment there with like, oh yeah, I'm fighting alongside my dad. This is cool.
I actually did want to say, I feel like at least currently I'm the only one that could really speak to this out of the three of us, but I will say that the kind of endish, midish point where you're back in the house and you're exploring and Rose is like, was this where I grew up? Is this like my home? And there's all this very heavy, like, Ethan, I'm going to be a dad that's always there and protect my daughter. Like, that actually kind of, and the tiny baby stuff, like, that actually kind of made me a bit sad and did hit. And that's purely just where I am at my time in life.
You're 6 months removed from having a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rose in the game is 6 months or so. So it's like exactly where I am with Eloise. So that did actually hit me, which I found cool. Because in general, this is just like, of course, she's going to figure out it's her dad and stuff. But that did actually hit a little bit home for me. I don't know if it will always hit home for me going forward, but it was cool to be at the exact same spot as Ethan, you know, in that relationship. And I will say in VR, Rose is accurately sized. It's quite impressive. Rose is an accurate 6-month baby.
I have a question for you guys. Were you guys disappointed that the Michael wasn't the Michael, the helicopter pilot from Resident Evil 4.
Michael!
I forgot that was even Michael.
Or he was Mike, I think.
Mike! Beers on Mike.
Yep.
Poor
The
Mike.
true guardian angel.
I forgot that was his name completely. I haven't gotten to that point in the remake yet, so.
Isn't it his name in the original 4? Isn't that? I don't know.
I can't remember. We played that game so long ago.
No, I think it is. I see Leon shouting Mike.
I do think it is Mike, though, as well. And I will say, regarding the whole Michael thing, I think it's kind of funny that Rose is like, "Oh, are you like my guardian angel?" And Ethan's just like, yeah, Michael, the angel. Sure." Like, like that's where he's totally just BSing and riffing with her.
Yeah, I did like kind of like their banter with each other a little bit. I thought that was kind of like fun. It kind of like made it less scary, which helps me play through it personally. So I kind of like that. And I don't like dislike Rose as a character. Like, I wouldn't be mad if they had her be, in future Resident Evil games for sure. But yeah, I don't know. Like you said, DLC, pretty good. Wouldn't play again though.
And then we mentioned this before, but I just to go back to it, the way it ends with how the ending of Village was also like, you find out that this was like didn't happen after the events of Village. It's kind of odd how they did that, but I guess that stays true with the whole Winter's family storyline has now completed, or whatever it says at the end of the game. So yeah, Shadows of Rose, okay, but I will never play it again probably. Let's talk about music. Do any of you guys have things to say about the soundtrack for this one? I do think, actually, Max, let's start with you this time.
I'm not a ton of notes this time on the soundtrack. One of my notes was bluntly like, I'm not noticing the songs or anything standing out per se. I think it's one of those soundtracks that blends in with what you're doing fairly well and emotionally amps you up. Like if you're in a firefight, themes are there, but nothing in particular. I did notice there's not really a save theme to necessarily speak of. I mean, when you are in a safe space shopping, particularly when the Duke is there with the save typewriter, you know, there's a theme, but it's not the same, which I was a little slightly bummed about, actually, not having that kind of Old Faithful tune in the background. However, it's been remixed. The one particular song that I did note was that the factory has kind of a techno synth, is what I wrote, just kind of under the score, which was additive, I thought, thematically with, this is a factory, we're building machines and monsters, and the Heisenberg is this electricity, magnetic kind of character. So I think the soundtrack in this game is just thematic and not so much in your face as something like Code Veronica or even Resident Evil 4 is a bit more in your face. So that was kind of what I noticed for Village's sound design.
I mean, I really don't have a whole lot more to say other than that. You kind of copied me bar for bar, word for word. Like I
swear, teacher, we didn't look at each other's notes.
Yeah, there was just not a whole lot that stood out to me in this one. Mike, I know you listened to this soundtrack today, though, to some degree. Was there anything that really stood out to you with that? Or
I guess like really the only like unique track I feel like is like the stuff that they play like while they're doing like the storybook section in the beginning. I feel like that's pretty different than what I've played from Resident Evil games, because it's so like kind of like more whimsical and storybooky fairy tale kind of.
Yeah,
it gives off that kind of feeling rather than like dread and things are going to kill me vibes. So I would say like, I guess that's like a unique track in it. It's not one that I particularly care for though. There was one when I agree with you guys about everything about the music. It feels more like it's an additive thing. It's like the same way how I feel about like the Resident Evil 2 remake soundtrack or whatever. It's more about like, there are a lot of quiet moments in this game, and it's more about the sound design of like, you hear something creeping around and a werewolf's gonna jump out at you, and then the music swells, and then you feel all this like anxiety and like, frantic whatever. Like then you get into combat and all that stuff, and I feel like it's more about those kind of moments rather than like actually playing music the entire time. I feel like when I played like Resident Evil 3 Remake, there was always music on the entire time, which was really weird. But yeah, I forgot what the track was. It was like one of the last. Oh, it was called like The Final Movement, and I was listening to that. I was like, this is crazy sounding. Like it's like super like it's like a banger. I was like, what's going on with this song?
Reminds me of the Hunk like side mission in RE2 that just has an absolute bonkers track that just feels so out of place but epic at the same time. I just like, what? We didn't need to go this hard, Capcom. We did not need to go.
I don't even know what part of the game it's in. Like I was like, this was in the game. I don't remember this at all, and I'm guessing it's the final boss fight or something. I don't know.
Could be in the Mercenaries mode, which I don't think any of us played. It could be in that.
True. I actually did play Mercenaries.
Oh, this guy dabbled. A dabbler.
And I have nothing really to say about it. It's Mercenaries with Resident Evil Village style combat. So that's about it.
Sounds like the thing.
Let's wrap up on this one then. This is obviously a harder question to answer here.
Is it?
I mean, to some degree. I mean, what is this game's legacy? I think the legacy at this moment is just this is the end of Ethan Winters. This is the final Ethan game in my mind. This is caps off the potential first-person run they've had here. If they do opt to go back to third person, which is what it seems like they're going to do with whatever Resident Evil 9 becomes. But yeah, I mean, more than anything, I think taking it back to full circle to what Mike said, this feels like Resident Evil Greatest Hits. Like if I was going to tell anybody to play a Resident Evil game, like to potentially hook them, this might be the one. This is high on the list. I don't know. Yeah, it hits a lot of the core elements that I think the series does so well. And that's kind of its legacy for me. But again, legacy is hard to discuss when this game is... We're coming up on its 2-year anniversary at the time of this recording, but it has not even been out for 2 years just yet. So,
I feel like, and this is me personally, and I'm maybe I'm in the minority here on it, and maybe I just have my information wrong, but I feel like this is the game that really cemented that like Resident Evil is like really back, like especially in like for modern games. Like we had 7, and 7 proved that there are good Resident Evil games. Like there will be some, maybe, potentially. Then there's the remake, which is obviously like, Resident Evil 2 is such a beloved game. I think, I don't know if people expected it to be as good as it was, but it was a good game. And it's like, okay, well then now they have this new one here, or new at the time. And I feel like maybe people could have seen it going both ways. Like it could be bad or it could be good, and it ended up being good. And I feel like this is the one that really cemented it, both on like the actual game and the franchise itself, but also like on a technical level. I feel like this is also like one of the ones that like, along with like Resident Evil 2 remake, but really this, especially with new gen consoles, or I guess like the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles, I feel like it is still kind of like a cool technical showpiece to show for like graphics and stuff.
Yeah.
It's still such a beautiful game to play, like even now. So
we didn't even talk about that, but yeah, visually I think this game looks great. Like the RE engine is still top notch. Like I think this game looks really, really good.
Yeah, I think it's like the perfect showcase for it. And even like I think I played it all with ray traced visuals, and for the most part, it was pretty solid 60 throughout the entire time. I think there's probably dips here and there, but it was never anything like, wow, this is not great. I think I was playing Resident Evil 4 remake, and I noticed more dips in that game than in this one. But yeah, it's a great game. I think it'll go down as like one of the best Resident Evil games, at least in like a top 5 for sure. I think it would.
Yeah, I Resident Evil Village is, I wrote it as a sample platter of horror, which is fun and refreshing in that way. You've got things where there's no gunplay at all, or there's a bunch of puzzles like we talked about, or there's a giant 11-foot tall lady chasing you around. There's just different types, and it gives you all these different hits of horror that you can experience in one game. That's pretty great. I think it gives it gameplay-wise, not gameplay, I suppose, because you're still shooting and solving things and whatnot, but it does give it a bit of a lack of focus. There's some, well, we want to try this, so we'll create this area and do that, and maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. And so it doesn't lead to it being all thriller and no filler. There's like slight, and this game is snappy, but the lake, so I almost said swamp, but the lake or like the werewolf cave, like those feel a bit unnecessary or imbalanced that way. And so I think if Capcom were to pursue this type of design in the future, maybe truly open where you get to choose where you're going, or a bit more cohesive design there instead of just trying what they thought would work. And some of it works, some of it doesn't. So I think that's part of it. But outside of that, this is the first game in the series, in one game, Resident Evil 4, I suppose, technically got there first, or no, because there's still not a first-person version of Resident Evil 4. But it's the first game in the series to have 3 different ways to play it, visually speaking, which is rather impressive. And obviously, I think this game has pushed the RE engine to at least its current limit in a Resident Evil sense, with it being on every possible platform, essentially, from cloud to even Apple Silicon on the Mac. They're very adoptive of putting their game on the platform, and it's cool to see Capcom doing that. I don't think they will necessarily do that with every Resident Evil game, but it's at least cool to see it done here with Village, which I do think is a great entry point into Resident Evil. You don't need to have played 1 through 7 to really enjoy this game. This game is fun, period, and I think that's the most important thing to take away from it.
You might be a little confused later on when you find out that your main character was dead the whole time somehow, and you get your heart ripped out and things like that. We didn't even touch on that. This game is very gory. Like, she rips your heart out and then like squeezes the blood on her face and is just like,
it's awesome.
It awesome.
It's pretty crazy.
If you just play the first like literal 10 minutes of Resident Evil 7, you'll see what you need to see.
Yeah, you're
basically
fine. And with that, I think that'll do it for Resident Evil Village. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to check out more of Chapter Select, you can head over to chapterselect.com and check out all of our other seasons. If your fungus is your thing, we got some stuff on The Last of Us. Or maybe first person. Have we done any first person games? No, we have not. But that may change someday. I don't know. We'll see. And then, Fast and Furious season was our previous one. Fast 10 coming out super soon, Logan. We'll have a new episode.
It is coming out really soon. I didn't even think about that. We're like a month out, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. Super soon. So it'll be exciting. We'll have an episode up on that. Michael was also in that season talking Tokyo Drift with us. So definitely go check that out. If you'd like to find Logan on Twitter, you can do so over at Moreman12 and his writing over at comicbook.com. Michael, you can find on Twitter at the Michael J. Ruiz. Same thing for Instagram, where you can check out all his skateboarding videos and whatever else he posts there. I'm not quite sure. Skateboarding and beer probably are the main things over there. And then his podcast, Bantam Banner, which he does with Ricky Freck, another Chapter Select alum. The two of them just fight over who can be on the show more. So definitely go check that out. And if you'd like to check out my work, you can go over to maxfrequency.net, where I do the Max Frequency podcast and do all my writing. So you can head there. But until next time, thank you all so much for listening, and adios.
Chapter Select is a Max Frequency production. This episode was researched, produced, and edited by me, Max Roberts. Season 5 is hosted by Logan Moore and myself. Season 5 is all about Resident Evil. For more on this season, go to chapterselect.com/season 5. Follow the show at Chapter Select and check out previous seasons at chapterselect.com.